Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of CAIR on Air. My name is Huzaifa Shabazz, and I'm the National Research and Advocacy Coordinator at the Council on American Islamic Relations. Thank you to all our viewers for tuning in, and a special thank you to all our listeners on American Muslim 360. As you know, October is National Bullying Prevention Month, and we will be doing a series of CAIR on Air shows this month highlighting the issue of bullying, its effects on American Muslim youth, and youth generally, and steps educators, parents, and students can take to prevent it. For today's show, we have a very distinguished guest who will be talking to us about religious-based bullying. Before we dive into today's topic, I'd like to let everyone know about a campaign we are doing this Saturday on October 9th. I'll let the producer put the image on the screen. As many of you are aware, CAIR has teamed up with over 40 domestic and international organizations to boycott Hilton hotels because of the refusal to cancel plans to build a luxury hotel over the ruins of an Uyghur mosque demolished and desecrated by the Chinese government in the city of Hotan. We are encouraging everyone to take part in a review storm, a Google review storm, starting at 12 a.m. on Saturday, October 9th. So we are encouraging our guests, everyone to leave a one-star review with the hashtag boycott Hilton at the New York Hilton Midtown, Capitol Hilton in Washington, D.C., or the Hilton Suites in Mecca. In the image, you'll see the 3 locations are listed on the bottom. The locations are listed also on the flyer, and please retweet and share the flyer on Twitter and Facebook, and you'll find it pinned in the top of CAIR's accounts. Our handle on both is @CAIR National. Now I'd like to transition and get the show started. I'd like to welcome on Erum Ikramullah, Research Project Manager at the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. As a research project manager, Erum manages the day-to-day activities of ISPU's research studies. Previously, she worked at Child Trends as a research analyst on both quantitative and qualitative research studies on topics related to reproductive health, risky adolescent behavior, and fatherhood. Erum has co-authored several academic journal articles and presented research at the Society for Research on Adolescence and the Population Association of America. Erum, thank you for coming on to the show.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Erum, with that, we just dive right in. So again, as mentioned, we really, this month is National Bullying Prevention Month. And one of the biggest trends that we've seen across the state is motivated religious-based bullying, right? Particularly when it comes to Muslim Americans, when it comes to Jewish Americans, right? So maybe we can start in the beginning by kind of talking about the scope, how big the scope of religious-based bullying is, and what are some of the trends that we've seen over the years.
Thank you. That's a really great place for us to start our conversation. So we at ISPU, we ask about religious-based bullying specifically in our annual, now biennial American Muslim poll. So this is a nationally representative poll of the American Muslim community, as well as the general public and other faith communities in the US. So this allows us to actually have a number that we can share rather than relying on anecdotal evidence alone. So in 2020, we found that about half of Muslim parents of school-age children reported that they had a child who experienced religious-based bullying. So it was 51%. And that's twice as often as families in the general public. So they were at 27%. Now, in terms of trends, we did ask the same question back in 2017. And at that time, we found that 43% of Muslim parents reported that they had a child who experienced bullying because of their faith. Now, that's statistically on par with this year. So basically what it tells us is that the problem hasn't gotten better. It's not declining. And, speaking of trends, it's also worth mentioning here what's going on in schools is really reflective of what Muslim adults experience, right? So we don't want to just look at schools to really understand the problem. We have to take a step back and look at what's going on generally. So our poll data from our poll show us that between 2016 and 2020, a steady 60% of Muslim adults report experiencing religious-based discrimination, which is much higher than all other faith groups we surveyed, except in 2020 when Jewish Americans were on par with Muslims. Now, at the same time, we have a measure of Islamophobia, which we call the Islamophobia Index, which measures agreement with anti-Muslim tropes. So what we've seen, we've been, calculating that index for the past 3 years, and what we have found is that there hasn't been a decline. So basically, what we're seeing is a small but steady group of proportion of the general public who carry anti-Muslim bias and tropes, which we're seeing trickle down into schools.
Right. And as we see, you mentioned some of the statistics were very fascinating, and I know that there's a misconception that bullying seems to be just a peer-to-peer problem, when in reality, as CAIR has found, ISPU has found, a lot of the bullying actually can even come from administrator to student or teacher to student. So can you talk a little bit about that? In what ways do school staff, how can they perpetuate and participate in this kind of bullying?
Yeah, that's a really important point you bring up, and one that we did ask about in our poll. So for people who responded that they did have a child who experienced bullying, we asked them about who was actually, the perpetrator, who was the bully in the instances that they've experienced. So in our most recent poll in 2020, we found that in nearly one third of the cases of bullying, so that's it was 30%, the parents reported that the bully was a teacher or school official. And I think it's really important to take a minute and let that sink in with audience members, that a third of the time that religious-based bullying occurs to Muslim students, to families with Muslim students, it's the teacher or a school official who's the bully. And these are the very people we entrust to protect and teach and serve as role models for our children. And this really just gets at what I just touched upon, how the anti-Muslim bias that we see in the general public among adults really does trickle down and have an impact on our children. It goes down to the school level where you have, adults working, but we don't know what biases they may hold. And it really speaks to the need for professional development for educators about their Muslim students.
Absolutely, and I can't emphasize more of your point. I mean, we just passed the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and every year CAIR receives many complaints when it comes to September and about issues around 9/11. Just an example, when we did our 2021 civil rights report, we had documented about 114 school-related incidences, and a big chunk of those had to do with Islamophobic school curriculum. So being singled out and isolated within the classroom to talk about that. And so it's a trend that we continuously see. And so maybe we can kind of transition to talk about, what are some of the effects that can be produced from that, right? So I think it's very clear that, depression can be a very, one of the things that can be produced, and isolation. So maybe if we can talk about some of the effects of religiously based bullying.
Yeah, that's definitely a really important question and a really important topic to think about, because sometimes we just think about, okay, what's the number, but to really think about what impact it's having upon the children. So we did publish a report in 2018. Once in 2017, when we first collected this statistic on religious-based bullying in schools, and when we saw, we were just shocked at the numbers we were getting, and to really address it, we held a convening with experts in the field to discuss this topic, and produced a report out of that convening, led by Dr. Nadia Ansari, who specializes in the mental health of American Muslim youth. And so through that report, and that report addresses this question you're asking. So basically, research in this area finds that children who experience religious-based bullying, as you mentioned, they suffer from negative emotions such as shame, self-hatred, and loneliness. It's also linked to higher levels of anxiety, depression, and even suicide ideation. And bullying can even have an impact on their physical health, their brain development, right? In cases with ongoing bullying, the stress produced by that leads to, elevated cortisol levels, which can disrupt brain development. And specifically when it comes to religious-based bullying that is tied to such an integral part of someone's identity, it can lead to, an exacerbation of these negative impacts. So the impacts are felt deeper by the victim, a child, who receives the bullying, and because it's such a key part of their identity, they sort of start to think that it's just going to happen over and over and over again because it's not something I'm changing about myself. So that also produces higher levels of stress and anxiety.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know that, we also have for teachers many toolkits that they can implement, resources within the classrooms. So there is a solution to this, and we can make environments better for students. And so I know that ISPU has a really great educators toolkit on religious-based bullying, and I'm going to have the producer put it up right now. So maybe we could spend some time going over the toolkit, and maybe some, go through the table of contents, some major themes within the toolkit that we can talk about and go over, things that stand out, things that may be very helpful. So we have the educators toolkit here on the screen, so maybe you can help us walk us through that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, and so why don't we scroll through it? So, the beginning is just an introduction part. So this first section at the top, maybe third of the toolkit, talks a lot, it shares resources that I've kind of mentioned. So the actual report, the religious-based bullying report, authored by Dr. Nadia Ansari, is available right there at the top. And then that video is her sort of presenting the findings that were, highlighted in the report. So the first section is really about resources, just about the topic, right? It's important that, educators, when they embark on professional development on this topic, that before learning about the Muslim students, it's important for us to let them know the challenges that are faced. So we wanted to kind of highlight what the issue is right at the top. Okay. And then if you keep scrolling down, you'll see in the middle section here these helpful handouts, which they're very helpful. These sort of one-page infographics, which are an easy and quick summary of key information that we believe will be useful to educators. So there's information about who are American Muslims, right? So just a primer on who is this community, and which will really help them understand and just have information about their American Muslim students. So we present that information, and then a summary about some of the challenges that these students may face. So what are the different forms of discrimination? We have an infographic highlighting that. And then actually, if the producer is able to click on the one all the way on the right, the 8 recommendations.
Yeah, I was going to ask if we can see one of them.
Yeah, I would highly recommend this as a resource. So the one all the way at the far right end of the screen, that is a one-pager which summarizes some of the recommendations from the report, but it's 8 recommendations on how to address religious-based bullying within schools. So some of these include what we're talking about now, which is developing teachers, educating them about their American Muslim students, as well as sort of validating and addressing the student who's faced the bullying, right? As well as the actual child or adult who committed the bullying. And then also really responding to each and every bullying case that's brought to the school, right? Sometimes what we find or what you hear is that, oh, I reported it, but nothing happened. Well, that just, all that does is, makes people, feel apathetic about the actual systems in place that are that are put in place to protect children. So actually addressing each and every case that's reported is actually quite vital. So we have several other recommendations that we feel are really, really useful to educators. And then, within that are also classroom resources that teachers can use, because not only is the toolkit there to educate them about their American Muslim students, but if they're in a situation or a subject where they're teaching about Islam or about Muslims, these resources are also helpful.
And it looks like the producer was able to, I think he was experiencing some technical difficulties, but we were able to put up the 8 recommendations if you wanted to go over a few of them.
Yeah. So the first one I mentioned already, which was, teachers should actually engage in professional development to learn about should engage in anti-bullying training in order to develop the skills necessary to implement a school's anti-bullying program, right? So it shouldn't be something where they're just told, oh, we have this program, but they're not actually educated about the goals, and then how to go about achieving the goals of that program. And then addressing and managing cases of bullying each and every time they're reported. Again, don't leave these cases unaddressed. And then we talked about, making sure to address the target of the bullying, as well as the child or adult who does bully, right? To address the individual situations of those people. And then also just the following recommendations, sort of 5 through 8, are about creating a culture in the school. So for the staff, students, for the entire school community, creating a culture of anti-bullying. So incorporating anti-bullying initiatives into school-based learnings, when they teach about socio-emotional development, ensuring students' ability to participate and thrive within their school community. Teachers should incentivize students to challenge biases, to speak up. And K through 12 teachers should ask questions, in the beginning of the school year as a way to get to know students. It's good to incorporate questions about faith celebrations, as well as just the general, likes and needs of each child. So basically, just promoting this culture of inclusion for all is really vital.
Right. And I see that on the resource kit, you all also have some really great videos. Did you want to touch on that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. And again, these are videos that can be used by the educators to teach themselves, but also, when appropriate in their class, to share with their classroom students. And they're basically videos that provide information of, like data points about the American Muslim community, but also like stories and talks about the experience of American Muslims, right? If they don't personally know, or they might just have like 1 or 2 Muslim students in their class, they might not have quite a grasp about the experience of American Muslims. And that there is a diversity in those experiences, but these resources, the videos at the bottom, offer a glimpse into that.
Great. Well, I also saw the other day, this is really interesting because I know this was I also went to a University of California system school, and MSA West was like a really big thing in college. And I'm not sure if you were part of this study, but could you talk a little bit about the purpose of that study and what was the aim of that one?
Yeah, so we did a study in 2019 with partnering with MSA West as an organization to study the need. It was sort of a needs assessment of MSA West students specifically, right? Where it wasn't a national sample, but it was a survey conducted of students who were attending a conference at MSA West. And really just to learn about, get a better glimpse into the lives of these Muslim college students, their specific challenges, their specific assets, what they bring to the table, what challenges they face, and then with some recommendations at the end for how MSAs in particular can address the challenges and needs of these students.
Awesome. And I would just second that these are some really great resources and very helpful. And I know that CAIR has actually put out a school resource document during the last month, during the 20th anniversary of 9/11, for school district leaders to really implement within the classrooms as well. And this ISP resource is just really great. And I know that Islamic Networks Group also does some really great work.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that as well, that,
Please.
and impress upon the viewers that, a lot of these resources on the American Muslim community, they're not part of formal anti-bullying programs that teachers go through, or professional development programs that the teachers go through. I think there's a push to make that happen more, but it's not, standardized or anything. So it's really, a lot of these resources exist in community organizations like ours, like CAIR, ISPU, the Family Youth Institute, ING, all have, and I'm sure many others who I've missed, have these resources available. But it's really about, we have to get those resources into the right hands. So I really just highly recommend that all parents and just community leaders, for the sake of our children in public schools, that they take time to share these resources with your child's teacher, or just with your local, neighborhood school, to the teachers and principals, because they need to hear from us. They're not getting it, in another way.
This seems to be an issue almost every year. There's like this wealth of data out there that really shows that Muslims and other religious minorities face bullying at very high levels, but there seems to be no sort of engagement with that data, or any sort of participation or willingness to see. I mean, there's some willingness to look at the data and say, okay, acknowledge that this is an issue, but we don't really see any implementation of those steps within the school board. So, I mean, what in your opinion, what do you think the kinds of steps school leaders need to take, rather than, of course, parents and other, nonprofit leaders, we can bring these stuff to the schools, but what the schools need to do,
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that's sort of where the recommendations we just presented that were in the educators toolkit, I mean, we would recommend all of those as well. But I think just kind of listening and being in tune with the students at the school, you get a general sense, but what are the pockets of student groups within your school who might not be in the majority, right? Really focusing on them and what their particular challenges might be and their particular needs might be, and then thinking through how they can address. And hopefully, if they've made that initial thought of who these groups of students are, including Muslim students, hopefully that will lead to kind of seeking out of resources. And then on our end at ISPU, we do work, in addition to just having these resources and encouraging people in the community to share them, we also work to educate educators, to provide trainings where we can, to organize trainings in different localities. So, if that's something that and I know a lot of, other organizations that we've mentioned are doing this work. So hopefully with all that put together, we can implement some change.
Great. And I think I just, you covered a lot of ground, and I just have one more question for you. And it's a simple question, but I think students need to hear it. So, we see that students, they can experience bullying, and they'll report it to like a teacher, they'll report it to a principal, but sometimes there seems to be a really large challenge in addressing what's really going on. And so, what kind of message would you say to the youth who are experiencing bullying for their faith, and what do you think, what should they do to really, attack this and really just, make sure that someone does something about this, right?
Yeah, no, thank you. And that's definitely a heavy question. I'm a mom of 2 kids, so I'm going to just talk as though I'm speaking to my own kids. But basically, I mean, I think the first thing is to acknowledge to the child that it's not their fault. They did not do anything wrong. They don't deserve such treatment. And then next is to speak up, seek help from a trusted adult. And if you've done that, within the school, then you go outside, hopefully to their parents. if parents aren't available, then to just other trusted adults within their family or community. Because as we've talked about today, there are advocates, there are organizations out there working on behalf of Muslim students who have rights. So know that they have rights to be safe within their school environment, and that there are people out there working to make sure that that's the case. So just try to get in touch with a trusted adult who can help get those resources connected.
Thank you so much, Erum. This was really great. And I really, again, I'd like to really stress, thank you for coming on. And it's always a pleasure, engaging with ISPU, really learning about the resources you all have. And I'm going to ask the producer to drop the educator's toolkit in the comments, in addition to the Know Your Rights document from Islamophobia.org that I'll probably put in later in the comments as well. But again, Erum, thanks so much for coming on, and we look forward to having you on again.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
And now I'll ask the producer to, again, put the flyer up for the Saturday event. So again, this Saturday, we are having the Google review storm. So again, why are we doing this? Hilton is licensing the construction of a Hampton hotel on the site of a bulldozed mosque in China's Uyghur region, where more than 1 million Muslims are being held in concentration camps. So if you're outraged to hear this, leave a 1-star Google review with the hashtag boycott Hilton at any of the 3 locations listed below on the graphic. Again, this is this Saturday, October 9th, beginning at 12 a.m. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in to CAIR on Air, and we will see you all next week. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.